Hi, everybody. I think we will start our meeting today. This is a special meeting of the Parks and Recs Commission, and which was properly agendized and public's been informed. If people in the audience who are here today want to speak, they've been given an opportunity to submit a speaker form. Great. If anybody wants to speak and hasn't submitted a speaker form, there's still time to do that. You can do that now if you'd like. Otherwise, we should start. Let's start with a call to order, please.
Let the record show all commissioners are present.
Okay. We will then all please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. Okay, so we will then start by going down to agenda item number 4, which is the Parks and Recreation user fees. There is a recommended action. 1, that the Parks and Recreation Commission by motion recommend the City Council to adopt the proposed Parks and Recreation user fees. And 2, that the Parks and Recreation Commission by motion recommend the City Council to establish the pass-through of actual credit card and debit card transaction processing fees, including permit processing fees through the registration software. Do we now turn it over? I believe so if we look through our agenda report, I think, which was also distributed to the public, is that correct? Okay.
Chair Winters, we have a short presentation.
Okay, would that be appropriate to do now?
Yes.
Okay, super, thank you.
Thank you, Chair Winters and members of the commission, and thank you to everybody who showed up tonight for this meeting. We're going to take you through just a presentation on the fees that are being recommended to the City Council. So just a timeline on how we got here up until now. In 2020 and 2021, the city hired a consultant for a citywide fee study. On August 11th, the citywide fee study was presented to City Council. That was when I was being transitioned into the director position from the manager position, and I felt that due to COVID-19 and the need for public outreach, we needed to put the Parks and Recreation fees on hold. The last update to our field fees, special events, outdoor facilities, and commercial use was in October of 1998. The last update of community and senior center fees was January 2002, and the last update of library facility fees was February 2008. And on February 9th, we reviewed the fees and updated figures with our finance department. And then from February through April, we finalized proposed fee recommendations and had internal meetings. We continued those meetings in correspondence with various groups in the community. And on May 2nd, which we're here tonight, we're holding a special meeting of the Parks and Recreation Commission to make a recommendation to council. Just a glimpse at how we're funded. Funding for Parks and Recreation Services, 24% of household property tax assessments are allocated to the city of Encinitas. Less than 4% of the property tax revenue is allocated to Parks and Recreation. About $8.2 million or 9% of the general fund budget was allocated to Parks and Recreation in 2022-23. And the 2022-23 Parks Division and Recreation Division budgets of a combined $5.6 million represents approximately 6% of the city's general fund. And I'll turn it over to David Norgard for the next couple slides.
Thank you, Travis. With that breakdown in funding in mind, this slide shows a number of projects that support our sports parks and sports organizations. The first one, I think all of us here are familiar with the Cardiff Sports Park backstops that were replaced on fields 3 and 4. That was under an emergency. Essentially, we had some vandalism there on one of them and took down another. Below that, we have a need to replace the aging light system at Cardiff Sports Park, and we actually applied for and were awarded a grant through the state of California to update those lights to LED. So that project is funded and has begun the initial stages to get that moving. And we also have a need to replace the backstops at fields 1 and 2 at Cardiff Sports Park. We are currently soliciting bids from different contractors and working with the league to apply for grants to replace those. A little more specific to some athletic organization specific needs, we have a need for netting at Ecke Field 2 to prevent balls from leaving the field and going into the skate park that is adjacent. Similarly, we need some sports netting at Leo Mullen to prevent soccer balls from going into the playground. The turf at Leo Mullen is nearing the end of its useful life and will need to be replaced in the next couple of years. So we're looking at about $680,000 there to replace that, and that estimate comes directly from manufacturers and installers. And then several sports organizations have inquired about lighting at Leo Mullen, and this is estimated to cost a minimum of $400,000, but I want to caution that that does not include costs for a consultant to amend the specific plan, infrastructure to upgrade the electrical, or a potential ballot measure depending on the specific height of the lights needed. And additional department projects, not just specific to sports, we have many needs throughout the department. We have 20 different parks, trails, beaches throughout the city that we're maintaining and keeping up. We have beach access refurbishments at Grandview, Swamis, and D Street. Grandview is actually funded, and we're in the phase now to have specifications prepared so that we can go out to bid for that project. But these projects are critical because they support health, safety, and welfare. They're critical infrastructure to access our beaches, and those 3 projects alone total $1.3 million. Additionally, we have a goal to replace at least a playground each year. We have approximately a 10-year backlog of playgrounds that need to be replaced throughout the city. And we are currently underway with a feasibility study to add sport courts at the Encinitas Community Park. If that feasibility analysis deems that it is feasible to add sport courts, we're looking at potentially $200,000 for the planning and design and permitting of that, which is currently unfunded. We would have to make a request from City Council. And the construction for those sport courts is currently not defined, as we don't know whether it's feasible or not. And then similarly, at the Community and Senior Center, we have a need for a shade structure over the equipment outdoors. The banquet room carpet has reached the end of its life. Similarly with the chairs in the room and the room divider, and we have a need for a security door at that location as well.
So I'll talk a little bit about the methodology that was done in 2021 and through 2023. In 2021, Wilden's Financial Services was hired to perform the citywide fee study. The fee study findings for parks and recreation included direction to set fees discretionally based on usage characteristics, policy goals, and benchmarks. A benchmark of other municipalities and school districts in the region was conducted. Nominal fee increases were implemented for most categories to raise the cost recovery in line with inflation. Other factors were considered, including exclusive use, time of use of public space, and non-resident considerations. And what that means is that when we have a special event that comes in, especially when they're using a field or a piece of property that's generally used by the public or by another user group, they're taking up that space where the other groups can't use that space during that time. The results from the 2021 study were updated to reflect current conditions. The timeline moving forward is that on May 24th, we're expecting to take the proposed fees to City Council. And then on July 1st, we'll be implementing fees with the exception of athletic field use. And then on January 1st, we would see the implementation of athletic field use fees, and then July 1st, 2024, we'd have our first annual CPI increase. One thing that I do want to clarify in the staff report is it does state that we bring in approximately $250,000 in revenue annually additionally, and obviously as the CPI increases over time, that would increase each year. But I do want to mention that because we wouldn't start the implementation of athletic field use fees, the figure would be more around the figure of $140,000 for that first year. And we're available for questions at this time. I'm sorry.
So I don't,
Yeah.
I'm not sure if we can just take questions right now from.
Yeah, we'll get back to that after public comment.
From the public right now, I don't think. You're looking for now questions from the commission?
Correct.
Thank you.
What was the number about the current revenue generation?
So the current revenue generation in the staff report was at $250,000 estimate. However, because we wouldn't start athletic field use fees until January of 2024, that figure would be around $140,000 for this first fiscal year.
Thank you. And is there any current revenue being generated?
There is current revenue being generated for some adult teams as far as athletic fields. We also are generating revenue from commercial use, facility rentals at the Community and Senior Center, outdoor facility use, and special events, and all of our recreation programs, of course.
Thank you.
I had a question regarding the credit card and debit card processing fees. Are you aware of other city departments or city fees where those are also added or recovered by the city for permits or for other types of city business licenses, things like that?
Sure. So in 2021, when we brought this forward to council, they implemented this for all city fees. So the only reason they haven't been charged yet is because we were putting parks and recreation fees on hold. So it is being charged for every other fee in the city.
And so if an organization wanted to avoid those type of fees, all they would need to do is just pay by cash or check with the finance department?
They could pay by cash, but there still is an active net fee for permitting. And that's $2.50 every single time that there is a change made to the permit.
Could you speak some to the other component of the price fee when it comes to the CPI and how that will kind of come to play in 2024 and on?
I'm going to defer to our senior management analyst, David Lissenby, on that one.
Yeah, thank you. So each July 1st, the fees would be adjusted according to the CPI for the area in general. So, that will be communicated out prior to the fee increase being implemented, but it will be tied to the CPI.
And how does that work with this first kind of transition year with regards to like the athletic fee permitting fees not going up until January 1st of 2024? Would they increase based upon the July data for 23?
So there would not be any CPI increase on top of what you're seeing before you for 2023-24. That CPI increase would come into effect on July 1st of 2024.
Thank you.
And CPI is the Consumer Price Index?
You're correct.
Okay, thanks.
Is there a plan to review the fees outside of the CPI in the next 5 years?
The plan would be to review these fees approximately 5 or 6 years again to see if we're in line with market rate. Generally speaking, the city as a whole will review fees every few years and implement new fees as there's a need for them. So we would likely take another look at this in approximately 5 or 6 years.
Go ahead. Okay. Could you give us a little bit more detail about the benchmarking that was taken for the your research, maybe what other cities that you worked with, and provide some more details about what you learned in your benchmarking study?
And school districts too, I think you have.
Sure. So for our fees, we've benchmarked area or cities like Carlsbad, San Marcos, Poway, Oceanside, Vista, Escondido, El Cajon, and then we also benchmarked ourselves against the school district because the school district is charging substantially higher fees for services than we are.
And can you summarize, just in general, how did we come out at, when we look at our proposed fee increases as to where those organizations are currently at?
Sure, I can speak specifically to athletic field fees because that's the one we focus the most on. We are at the lower end of cost recovery on our field fees, comparable to all the other cities that we've put ourselves up against.
Could you also give us a little bit more understanding of, on the fee structure, it looks like there were different categories. They were kind of in Roman numerals 1 through 5, I think, that differentiate between commercial or non-commercial type organizations. Could you help us understand what those categories mean and kind of what the thought process behind that was as well?
That one's fine if you roll down to community center fees. You're speaking specifically on the community center fees, correct?
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah,
Sure.
Speaking on the community center fees, I guess it's related to both hourly rates and deposits, kind of how that shakes out between the various types of entities that use the community center.
Right. So the deposits wouldn't change based on what group category you fall into, but group 1 would obviously be city-sponsored or any type of city-partnered events. We don't charge ourselves for those fees, and if we have a partnership with an organization, we don't charge fees for that. Group 2 would be your nonprofit groups that are benefiting the community as a whole. Your Group 3 fees would be group users that are private events that do not benefit the community as a whole. Group 4 fees would then be your commercial use or for-profit groups. And then Group 5 would be non-resident fees.
Great. And I guess switching then to, I think they're called special event fees. I'm just curious, do we make a distinction on a special event, whether it's a nonprofit that's using that or a commercial, or do we not have that same type of grades of fees on the special event side?
Yes, you'll notice the different categories here on the left on the screen. You have residents, youth, and senior groups. Then you have resident service, educational, recreational, nonprofit, or private party. And then resident for-profit or commercial business. And then non-resident categories. And then they're also categorized based on the size of the event.
Got it. Okay, so it's that same kind of theme is going through where there are a different range of fees depending on the type of event, whether it's nonprofit, commercial, and what have you. Okay.
That's correct.
Thanks for pointing that out. I see it clearly now. Sorry.
That's okay.
When it comes to the special event permits and it being a non-resident versus resident, I understand how we kind of do that for sports teams because we look at, do they have 70% or more resident as participants, but how does that work with regards to defining kind of these other events as to whether they're resident or not resident, or is it based upon whether they serve the community, or could you speak more to that?
So that's based on whether or not the organization is based in Encinitas or not.
I think Commissioner Meldal, you had a question?
Yeah, so you mentioned that Encinitas is on the lower end of full cost recovery, but how do the actual fees themselves compare to, if you can draw any kind of comparison between, say, our neighbor cities?
Right. So going back to athletic fees again, the The athletic fees are kind of all over the map, how they're being charged in different cities, and it's relevant to how many, a variety of things. It can be relevant to any type of joint use that they have with the school district. It can have to do with the number of fields that they have. It has to do with the resources that they have, but they are all over the map. What we're proposing is still on the lower end of fees being charged by our other jurisdictions that we've surveyed.
Can you speak perhaps a little bit to the use of proceeds? Would the fees that are generated from this program just go into the general fund of the Parks and Rec department and therefore allocated on an as-needed basis? I know that we have emergency uses of funds that we obviously can't predict, that we've talked about with the backstops, which were vandalized. We kind of had to repair those right away. Is there any segregation of these fees, or any segregation of the income that these fees generate, or does it kind of go into our into the general Parks and Rec budget and then allocated as deemed kind of most importantly?
Sure. So as you can see, we have a lot of unfunded projects that are on our list. And one of the things that we would do as a staff is that we would recommend that we would use some of these fees to offset the costs of those projects. But again, remember that allocations to different things that are done in the city, whether it's operating CIP or whether it's personnel, is all up at the discretion of the city council.
So the fee increases that we're proposing, then they could go to Parks and Rec, but they could end up in the city's general fund for something else, or is it more likely that it stay with us in Parks and Rec?
So I can't guarantee that they're going to stay in Parks and Recreation. We could definitely bring that up. That would be something that we would recommend, to bring those back to Parks and Recreation, to do Parks and Recreation programs, and also to support the athletic groups that are using our facilities and doing facility upgrades at our community and senior center to benefit these groups that are paying these fees.
And does the current recommendation include that they would stay with Parks and Rec?
So this current recommendation is based primarily on fee increases. Again, that would be at the city council level that we could make a suggestion or have those conversations with.
So as a commission, we could suggest that we'd like to, whatever fees were generated, that they would stay within the department.
You certainly could.
And that recommendation would just be accomplished by perhaps amending the motion that we might vote on later this evening?
Correct. Remember, the recommendation before you is a recommended action. You can take the action that you deem appropriate after the conversation and after hearing from the public on this.
Understood. Okay, thank you. Any other commissioners have questions at this time? No, looks like we've fired all the questions at you. Thank you very much for answering. I appreciate it very much.
You're very welcome.
I think the next thing on our agenda is public comments. Is that correct? Can you tell me approximately how many? We have 3? Okay, and are there any time donations?
There are no time donations.
No time. Okay, so there's 3 public speakers, and each public speaker is allotted 3 minutes? Mm-hmm. Okay. Just for our public speakers, thank you very much for being here. I appreciate it very much. Your comments are very valuable to us. They educate us. They inform us. They help with this dialogue. Everyone is allotted 3 minutes. There's only 3 speakers, so really would like everyone to get their full time. If the buzzer goes off when you're in the middle, if you could just please try to finish as quick as you could thereafter, to be fair to the other speakers, and those are just kind of the rules. In addition, you may or may not know, but we're actually not allowed to engage in a dialogue with you or ask follow-up questions. We're just really here to listen and learn from you, and by our non-responsiveness, it doesn't mean that we're not listening and learning. It just means that there's certain rules of what's been on the agenda and not, and that's kind of how we have to react. So you'll see us probably taking notes, but we really can't engage in a dialogue. So
just a point of order, Chair Winters, you can ask clarifying questions because this is an agendized item. But, and so that you could ask clarifying questions during this time if you have any follow-up for the
Great.
speaker.
Thank you very much for letting us know that. Okay.
Okay. First speaker we have is Joel Walt. You have 3 minutes to address the commission.
Thank you guys all so much for having me. My name is Joel, and I'm a gentle yoga coach here. I live in the Cardiff area. And I'm here today. I wanted to start a gentle yoga class in Cardiff at the park in Glen Park. A couple reasons. One is that there's a homeless man that lives there who screams obscenities all day long. And everyone in the neighborhood knows it. And it's kind of part of the community, and it is what it is. But I wanted to bring some good energy to the park. And two, as a service provider and yoga teacher here in Encinitas and Cardiff, I need to make money. Things have gotten really expensive. And I think as Travis had mentioned around CPI, rents are over $2,000 for a studio for someone like myself in the area. The CPI, we all know it was near 10% and up and up and up. And the groceries are expensive and everything is expensive. And I know it's hit every person in this room. But I'll also say that I think it's hit small businesses, people, service providers like ourselves, probably even a little bit more, because that is the extra money that we have that we're using on groceries or doing other things. And I think that the community stuff is really important. I think getting the community together, especially after COVID, is really important. And I also recognize that when you take on top of the inflation, the rent, the $800 annual fee for the state, the $40 city fee, you add an extra $225, and then you keep raising it at the CPI, which is going to affect people like myself more than most, but everybody. I think it just makes it harder and harder to live here in our positions. I think you will continue to lose young people, young professionals, cooks, yoga teachers, fitness people who want to help the community and bring things to the community and also be successful in our jobs. So that is all I really have to say. I just want you to consider that the people in our positions, I think we do hopefully provide a benefit for the community. But it is hard here. It's at the margins living here in these positions when you're a small business. So I do think that increasing the fees will make it harder. And it's harder just to jump in if you don't even know, like, how am I going to make $1,000, $500? Like, that's 50% or 25% of what you're making. It's not worth it, to be honest with you. So hopefully that's helpful. Any questions or?
I have a question.
Yes.
Have you, in your business plan, have you estimated how much the fees will cost you in whatever planning that you've done, this fee increase?
When you're saying like the $200, because I heard it from Ross just recently, the $200 or the CPI kind of increase that you're mentioning?
Sorry, the increase in fees that we're considering tonight.
To be honest, what I did was I put it into perspective of like how much might I make doing this and how much would that equal? And like, credit card fees are what, 4%, right? Well, if I make $1,000 and it's a $250 fee, that's 25% of what I make from that particular thing. If I make $10,000 and it's $250, that's 4%, right? But that's a lot. Like, that is a lot. 4% is a lot. If you make $10,000, and I don't think many people like myself on a, going once a week or twice a week are going to make $10,000. It's more likely going to be a few. And so you're looking at probably close to 10% of the revenue that I'd actually probably bring in, if not, more, just depending on who's coming. So I think there will be some high achievers, yes, but I think the average person just trying to do something, you're going to be paying a good 10 to 20% of what you're actually making, which is, on top of everything else. So,
Okay, thank you.
you're welcome. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Our next speaker is Amelia Brodka.
Good evening. Thank you, Chair Winters and members of the commission. And thank you all so much for considering the balls flying into the skate park and looking for solutions and how to solve those problems. I realize that everything is really cost prohibitive these days on all fronts. And my name is Amelia Brodka. I'm an Olympic skateboarder, and I run Exposure Skate, which is a nonprofit that empowers women, girls, and non-binary individuals through skateboarding. And we've had enormous support from the city over the years. We've been having programming here since 2014. We provide absolutely free programs to women and girls, specifically at the Encinitas Community Park. And we also bring the world's largest women's skateboarding event here to Encinitas. And we absolutely love the parks here, and we love creating an atmosphere of inclusion and diversity in these public parks. And unfortunately, we're technically located in Vista, even though all of our programming takes place here. So we are a nonprofit, but I'm not sure that we would qualify for those fees because we are technically non-resident. And we also promote community service through our programs. So in our youth program, the girls give back to a different community in need with every event. They learn to skateboard from other local Olympians as well, who come and volunteer their time. And then the girls are involved in creating homeless support kits or creating donation kits to the CRC. And our major event supports survivors of domestic violence, specifically for the Community Resource Center's programming. And unfortunately, these new fees might be cost prohibitive to us because just the fees of just everyday access and specifically events have just gone through the roof. And I've calculated that this increase would cost us at least $2,780 annually in order to just run the programs that we run here that we would love to just keep free to the community in order to promote diversity and inclusion in the local parks. And perhaps there could be a fee waiver application. I do understand that, there are so many things that cost money that are needed in the city. So just looking for maybe a mutual community solution that we can move forward with. And I just really hope that we can continue to use the local park and provide free services to the community and provide increased tourism during a time when there isn't a lot of it. And thank you for your time.
Commissioner Halloran?
I just wanted to say thank you for everything you do for the community and your time.
Thank you.
I also wanted to thank you very much. You certainly do put Encinitas on the map when it comes to getting exposure, so to speak, with women's and skateboarding, and I think that's fantastic. I would say that, too, that your organization, based upon some of the things that you've said, brings a lot of additional community benefit with regards to what you do and the outreach that you do. There are always those opportunities, and I think in the big picture, we're trying to create a fee schedule that's going to work for the community, that there are options where you could appeal to the city council, and you can kind of detail some of the community value that you give back to the community, that you could always go to them regarding some fee waiving or a percentage of it where it might be a better fit. So I think right now, though, we're just trying to come up with just a general structure for everybody, and then there may be some one-off opportunities where something could be worked out.
Thank you so much.
Sorry, I just had a clarifying question. Do you track of your participants, how many come from the city of Encinitas versus how many come from any other communities nearby?
Yes, most of our, I would say at least 78% of our youth program is Encinitas residents. And our major event, we do have a lot of international pros. We have 200 total participants. And then we also have many local vendors that, have booths during our event. So the event is certainly more international participants, but at least that brings revenue to the city during a time where there isn't typically a ton of tourism.
Great, thank you very much.
And our final speaker is Ted Haberfield.
Thank you, Chair Winters. Good to see you again. Thank you, Commissioners. My name is Ted Haberfield. I'm the president of Encinitas Little League. I've been the president at ELL for the last 6 years. We were founded in 1957 and have been in the city since then. And I do have to first thank you, the Parks and Recreation. It's been a wonderful partnership and relationship, at least since the 6 years I've been on board with everyone, and specifically Travis, I'd like to say thank you. Our relationship actually goes back very, very far. I first want to say, though, I'm not opposed to fees. I know I marked the slip as opposed. What I am opposed to is for nonprofits. Those leagues or recreational leagues that are representing the community. And I'm actually a little bit nervous because I have and represent over 700 families in the city of Encinitas. The operating budget that we work off of is about $175,000 a year. If we estimated the hours, and we haven't gotten super minute on estimating exactly what that looks like, but from doing the math and the simple math, we're probably looking at about a 10 to 20% increase in our operating budget for a nonprofit. I can completely understand the reasoning behind charging some of your for-profit club type teams and so forth, but being a staple for baseball in the community, our relationship with ECI, and let me, if you don't mind, just educate you a little bit about the relationship with ECI, YMCA, and the city. There's actually an agreement that dates 35 years ago that expires 35 years, so it actually expires in 2025, for which the YMCA, which is the landlord to the ECI fields, the baseball fields that you're probably familiar with on Saxony Road, there was a three-way agreement where you as the city was the tenant, and we as Encinitas Little League and the city worked together with the landlord, and the YMCA charged a $25 lease for 35 years. So we've been able to appreciate that and have benefited greatly over the past 35 years of not having permit or leasing fees. And granted, we pay our special permit fees and all that kind of stuff throughout the years. Also, I do want to mention that the league estimates probably about $25,000 to $50,000 per year in maintaining the fields there. So we very little do we ever come to the city to ask for money. I know there's some expenditures coming up that you saw listed as far as netting and protecting the skate park and so forth. We are actually investing in that as well, in addition to what you guys would be putting into that. We've paid for the trajectory consulting out of our budget dollars. So bottom line, it's been a great partnership with the city and ELL. Big supporter of whatever it takes to get funding and your budget fixed for all the different ancillary costs. But when it comes to the rec, and I appreciate, is it Ross Ritter? Commissioner Ritter's comments regarding potential one-offs and situations where we have some of these nonprofits that are really helping the community and can't potentially afford a 10 or 20% hit. And most of it, I know I'm out of time, but most of it, we do our own fundraising, and it all comes from the families that couldn't imagine having to increase fees.
Thank you. Any clarifying questions or anything?
So you estimate correct me if I'm wrong, a 10 to 20% increase in your fees. If we impose this fee structure, you're talking about there has been a just an increase in your expenses?
Oh, good, yeah, great question. So if you break down the hourly estimated fee, because that's what would hit us, it'll run anywhere between, we estimate between $15,000 to $30,000 per year. And if we have an operating budget, if it stayed the same, right, at 175, that's where I get the 10 to 20% increase to our operating budget that we would have to pass on to the residents.
Thank you.
You mentioned that you spend about 25 to 30,000 a year maintaining the fields. Can
Yes,
you
sir.
expand on that?
Yeah, so when it comes to, as an example, 2 years ago, we put in a brand-new grass infield on Ecke Field 2. That cost us about $40,000 to put all that in with all the irrigation and so forth. Obviously, the permitting and working with the contractors and the city was all part of that, but we funded that 100%. And then each year, we do all the backstops. We improve the scorekeeper tables that are outside. We actually brought in and improved the grounds by putting in new picnic tables. We put in new netting, brand new batting cages. There's just things that are around the field itself when it comes to just maintaining grass and stuff like that. Although we do have a general contractor that you guys do excel, there's other things that we have to do on our own too.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
I've got a question, and it's good to see you again as well, Ted. So, and thank you very much for all your hard work with the Little League. I know it impacts and provides great memories for many families here in town. Kind of the same question I asked Amelia. Do you have a do you track how many kids you get from Encinitas versus any kind of neighboring community? And do you know what percentage? I know it's Encinitas Little League, but do you know what percentage of the kids are actually Encinitas residents versus a neighboring community?
Yeah, so it's good news for us, and we have to abide by international Little League rules. And international Little League rules, in order to have a charter at Little League, they have to be within our boundaries. So we're probably 90% plus residency when it comes to Encinitas. Now that would include Encinitas, Leucadia, Cardiff. There are some that would be that in that 10% that are boundaried up in the South Carlsbad area. So Palomar Airport Road south to where it hits our border there at La Costa would technically be those non-residents. And I estimate that to be about maybe just under 10%.
Okay, thank you very much. Appreciate it. Any other?
This may be for the Parks and Rec organization or yourself, if you know where the Little League is categorized on here. And so the hourly fee is it $5 an hour or is it $10 an hour? I'm not sure.
It's the, I believe it's 5, right, Travis?
So Little League would be categories because in 2022, their residency rate was 86%. To be considered a resident nonprofit youth group, you have to have at least 70% residency. So they would be in that lowest category.
Okay.
Travis knows more about our league than I do. But it's yeah, I'll let that stand then. Yeah, no more.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you. Appreciate your comments.
All right, thank you.
Thanks.
So do we just open it up for discussion among ourselves?
Let's see. Like to. Yes.
Chair, who would you like me to submit that for your legal review? Would I submit that to Margaret or Travis? Okay.
Right.
Yeah, there is a standing 35-year agreement with Encinitas Little League that technically I don't think any fees are allowed to be imposed up through the end of next year. So I'll take your direction.
Let's go to, let's send that to
Parks and
Travis.
Rec?
Yeah,
Okay.
thank you.
Thank you. Sorry to interrupt.
Okay, thanks. Thank you for doing that. So can we call the agenda back up for a second then? Or- David? Sorry, Manager Norgard, can you call the agenda back up, please?
Chair Winters, were you asking for the staff report to come back up on screen, or what were you?
No, I just actually wanted to see the next item that was on the agenda. I don't have it on the screens here in front of me.
This is the only agenda item tonight.
Thank you. I wasn't sure now if there was an agenda item of further discussion or questions that could be asked at this time.
Further questions, further conversation about the agenda item? Yeah.
Perfect. Okay, thank you. So I guess I'll open it up to the commission if you could just get my attention. If there are any other questions, clarifying questions to staff about the report or anything, now would be the time to have that discussion. So I don't know if anybody wanted to had any questions or comments starting right now.
One follow-up question regarding like what Commissioner Ritter said about the fees coming back to be in Parks and Recreation budget and used for Parks and Recreation, or the current fees charged by the city coming back to Parks and Recreation?
Some of the fees are coming back to Parks and Recreation, obviously, because we're highly subsidized. So any type of money that we receive into the department to do various things is part of that fee structure. So, if depending on how you look at it, you could say, yeah, all the fees are coming, and the rest of it is subsidized. But we are highly subsidized.
So, and it could be exactly that. Even if we say we'd like these fees to be back to the department at 100% level, the city council could just decide, well, we'll just not fund you $250,000 that we normally would have. So it is one of those things of, how do you measure the buckets?
Yeah, I concur. So for just the commissioners, there's an aggregate amount of money in the city, and then the Parks and Rec Department gets its what's deemed appropriate not by us, of course, but by City Council. And then this would be additional funds that go into the city's general operating budget, I assume. And then, so dollars are fungible, so hopefully they would get an increase in their budget allocation by this amount or more. So, but I understand the question.
But I do think it's worthwhile to add that in our proposal. I don't think it hurts to suggest that any fees increases that would happen, that they would stay within the department to help pay for the unfunded projects that we currently have. But again, it's all up to the city council as to whether they want to then still fund us at the same levels that we would normally plan to be funded at.
I've got one more question. I think you'd mentioned earlier about certain organizations are almost getting 100% of the allocation of certain fields. I believe you had said that, so please correct me if I'm wrong on that. Is it of your belief that if an organization decided not to use a field in one season, that there are other organizations that are currently maybe not getting the allocation that they want, or other organizations that perhaps have been waiting to get field allocation? Can you kind of maybe talk a little bit about the utilization, if you will, of our fields?
So at the city level, I can't speak on the school district, but I have heard rumors that there are some groups that have a monopoly on the school district fields. As far as our city fields, we do a pretty good job of looking at historical usage, the size of the organization, and making sure that we're distributing them not only to all of our organizations that we work with, but also doing a good diverse allocation based on the different sports that we're offering here in the city. So we don't want to just offer soccer, for example. We want to make sure that we have opportunities for football, and we have opportunities for baseball and all the other sports.
Thank you.
I kind of feel like, just as we kind of put all this in perspective, that no one likes fee increases. And we've all experienced fee increases throughout the last couple years after COVID and just inflation in general. But I do feel like for most of our fees, we haven't raised them in 25 years. So I do get this sense that we definitely should raise fees, that we should be at a similar level, and I'm happy to hear that we're on the lower end of the fees that our sister cities are at, that our school district is at. So I feel like we're still very competitive, but there are hard costs that the department has to take on, and there are hard costs in getting permits, there are hard costs in maintenance, and keeping the facilities up to where the organizations would actually want to be on our fields, be in our community center. And I think that if that investment's not necessarily coming from city budget, we also have to take a look at who's using that, who's using the fields, who's using the community center. And I think that if we look at the cost, it's still, we're only recouping less than 10% of what the actual fee for running those programs is. So I do feel like it's still very generous from the city side with regards to keeping the fee structure as low as possible. But I think it is one of those things where in these times we need to take a look at that. And I find that if we're going to continue to provide this level of service to our citizens, that we need to make sure that we can continue the investment in maintaining it.
Yeah, I think those are good points. Thank you for sharing those. When I had a chance to review the matrix of the various fees, I was pleased to see that there were, that it seemed and appeared that obviously a tremendous amount of thought went into it. It seems that there's different, of course, categories for nonprofits versus commercial, which I think feels appropriate. It seems like we have different categories that perhaps provide lower fees for organizations that are a little bit more Encinitas-centric than those that aren't. I think that if there are special circumstances, I think we could hopefully have an avenue or a path where we could try to address those on a case-by-case basis as well. But I think in terms of an aggregate policy, I feel comfortable with the benchmarking. I feel like that was done professionally and appropriate. And it just seems to me like when I initially read that some of the fees hadn't been increased for 20 years or longer, 25 years in certain cases, it seems like this was really not something that should be surprising, I guess. And in addition, when I also looked at the percentage of cost recovery, so the amount these fees actually cover what it does cost us to use the fields in the community center, it also seemed to be something that was proportionate, and I don't know if I'd use the word generous, but perhaps at least reasonable, and perhaps generous. So I felt and do feel that this was a well thought out study. I think it's been presented well, and again, due to the things I've already said, I think it kind of feels like it's really, I hate to use the word, but in the ballpark of what's appropriate at this time.
Is there a policy for fee waivers for nonprofits? There was an attachment that came today, or I think from SACO, the senior yoga community outreach, and they're requesting a fee waiver, and this young lady here is also requesting a fee waiver. How do we pick the winners and losers? And
Sure. So when we get requests like that are special circumstance requests, or if they're a tremendous community benefit where they're offering free services in exchange, we do look at those and we review those with the city manager to bring those potentially forward to the city council. We have very few of those.
So the city council has the final say on that?
Correct. Staff cannot waive fees or discount fees. Only the city council has the power to do that. And just for reference, the Silver Age Yoga fees that you see the feed waiver request for, that was a program that we inherited from the library when they determined that they didn't want to continue fitness-related free programs, and we saw a tremendous benefit to the health of our seniors in the community, and so we have been bringing a fee waiver for that program forward every year to benefit those seniors who partake in that healthier, active lifestyle up at the library.
Thank you. I have another question. You have to excuse my ignorance on this, but when we had our meetings before this meeting, talking about lighting charges will be charged hourly and based on actual light use. What is a MUSCO report?
Sure. So Musco is our lighting, they're basically our lighting dealer that we work with, and all of our all the lights are programmed through the Musco software that we use. And so let's say that Little League comes in and they have a field allocation from 3 to 11, and the lights go on at 8 o'clock, but they actually got done early and they're done at 9 o'clock. Leagues do have their own codes to shut their lights off, and that's encouraged. What we've seen is sometimes lights are left on even after the fields are vacated. So the user group will be charged for actual light use. So if they fail to shut the lights off when they leave the fields, they will be charged all the way up to the time that the lights are programmed to go off.
Thank you.
I don't quite understand how the contract works between with Encinitas Little League, but I also think that if they are investing in the park in the levels that he was indicating, that there might be some consideration with regards to some fee waiver of some percentage. Because I feel like they're doing part of what we want our fees to do, and that is to be able to maintain the parks at our current level or better. So, like I said, I'm not really familiar with how that relationship between the Y, the city, the Little League, et cetera, works out, but I'm just curious if that might be something that we could consider.
I can answer that question. So we do have an agreement with the YMCA, and I believe, and don't quote me on this, I believe the contract is actually up in December of this year, not next year. So we're already looking at that contract. We're going to be renegotiating with the YMCA. We also found out during our athletic field use meeting last week that the Little League believes that there is an agreement with the Ecke family that they would receive free fields for that first 35 years. So this would all be in the negotiations that we do with the YMCA to continue that lease agreement.
I just have one last question. I think, Director Carlin, you would use the words, if somebody partners with the city, there's a different structure. Could you give me a little bit more edification or educate me a little bit what that means to kind of partner with the city?
Sure. So we generally do these partnerships on a program, on an event that we would possibly do. As some of you may remember that we used to have a dog event. And Cardiff 101 came in and said, hey, we'd like to partner with the city to make this an even better event. And so we took them on as a community partner, and in that partnership, we waive certain fees associated with that event. It generally is a fee waiver that is for special events is usually what we do, and we do it through an MOU. But we have done fee waivers like Silver Age Yoga, which benefits the senior population for free programming. So we have done it there too. Again, just a handful of organizations that we have that relationship with.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments by any commissioner? No. Okay. Would anyone? Well, the next agenda item, there is a recommended action. So we'd be looking for a motion as relates to the recommended action, unless people wanted to suggest a modification to the recommended action. But I'll just read it as it stands right now. The recommended action that the Parks and Recreation Commission, by motion, recommend to the City Council to adopt the proposed Parks and Recreation user fees, and 2, that the Parks and Recreation Commission, by motion, recommend to the City Council to establish the pass-through of actual credit card and debit card transaction processing fees, including permit processing fees through the registration software. So
There was a proposal to potentially add something to it to say that we strongly recommend, I guess we can't say demand, even though I'd like to, that the fee increase translates directly to an increase in the Parks and Recreation budget. Is that something that we add as an amendment, or?
So we could potentially modify number 1. If this is, well, I'll leave that. Let's start that as a discussion. Do other people feel that the current recommended action should be modified per the discussion tonight and per Commissioner Meldahl's suggestion? Again, this is all just a recommendation to City Council. Again, I'll kind of remind everybody, money is fungible, so we'll certainly hope to get these amounts of money, but it all is kind of going to the same coffers. But I understand the sentiment and the spirit of it. So I don't know if other commissioners feel like that's something that should be added to the part 1 of the recommended action.
I would support that.
I actually have a question for the Parks Department and whether or not that we have an estimate of the additional revenue that would be generated from the fee schedules. It was,
So we're
was it 100,000, 100,000 this year and
So we're
250,000 next year?
Thanks for the question. So we're estimating in fiscal year 2023-24, it'd be approximately $140,000, and then in future years it could be 250 on up.
Thank you. Given that our current budget is 5.6 million, is that right? That's the budget we're receiving currently from the city?
Yeah, so that would be for Parks and Recreation. As you know, we also have Cultural Arts in our division, or our department, and then also we also have our administrative division. So that 5.6 million there represents Parks and Recreation, which would include the community senior center.
Thank you for those details.
And just to clarify as well, that was the 2022-23 figure.
Great, thank you. We can add it, or I probably wouldn't support it, but I might not fight it either. I don't know if it's worth the energy to put it in there.
You're talking about the extra, yeah.
Right,
Yeah.
yeah. I think that goes unsaid, but
Right.
if we want to say it, then
Well, it doesn't feel like we're getting kind of a mixed signals on whether we want to change the recommended action or not, unless Commissioner Hanson, you have anything to add on whether you want to change the recommended action or leave it?
I think I'm going the same place as Commissioner O'Halloran. It's so minor to put a condition on it. It's just giving them something else to talk about, and I'd rather not do it.
Yeah, that's the way I'm leaning as well. So I guess, is there a motion? I guess we can do it just in one motion for both. So do we have a motion as it relates to the recommended action? And do we have a second?
I'll second.
Okay. I think you should see on your screen, you can vote.
Okay, the motion passes.
Okay, so that motion has passed. I don't see any other items on our agenda, so I think I'd like to move to adjourn the meeting at 6:35 p.m.